Well, my name is Tyler Lotz, and I work primarily in ceramics, and I'm a professor at Illinois State University, and I'm an artist in McLean County. Well, primarily the work that I'm going to be showing at the Art Center this year is going to be mostly sculptures, pedestal-based sculpture and wall sculpture that are influenced by my experiences in the landscape from growing up, my childhood, and also in my adulthood, spending a lot of time traveling, taking in different kinds of landscape. But mostly I think it's about when I'm processing it when I return and the way that I'm feeling about it in hindsight. So some of the shapes and forms that I'm working with and colors really and textures that I get from different clays and different surfaces in the clays, these are all inspired by experiences that I've had walking on a trail or spending time. I spend a lot of time in water. I'm a fly fisherman, so I spend a lot of time ankle deep or knee deep, standing in cold water, looking up at cliff sides, looking at striations and in the rock forms. One recent trip that I just took in Colorado, I went hiking in the Black Canyon of the Gunnison River, and I'm looking up at 2,000-foot cliffs in a river all by myself, freezing my butt off. And when you see that kind of a landscape from down inside of it, it's an entirely different experience than seeing that from above. And I like to think that my pieces can somehow hold both of those points of view of a particular landscape. And then again, as I mentioned, somehow capturing some sort of a view from the experience from my memory, not just what I'm actually seeing there. They're never just what I'm seeing there in that actual space. It's some sort of an amalgam of that experience and also other experiences often being folded in. I think mostly this more recent work, as you can see from some of the pieces here, they're a little bit darker than some of the work has been in the past. One of the things that is happening just as it's also happening as a natural byproduct of working with the materials. So I'm choosing clays and underglazes and glazes that in some cases are inherently darker. Like iron is a major component in a lot of clays, which gives you the dark browns or even the light browns that you find in clay. That's not to say that you can't get whites and brighter colors. You can with porcelains and things like that, and it's also something that is still actually happening in the work. But I think one of the things that I was trying to get to happen in the work is to make it at moments feel a little bit more like the actual experience that I was having, and then in other ways, maybe when the colors are a little bit brighter, they're kind of tweaked or enhanced by distance, by time. And so, I think I like for that to happen a little bit more in smaller moments in the work as a way of as you travel around the work, you kind of situate yourself in a particular area. You get locked into an area, perhaps because of its color, perhaps because of its texture, something like that. And then, again, unlock from it and be able to move back around the form a little bit more to hopefully discover something else. So that thing that you might discover somewhere else may be a shift in the form, it may be a shift in its reflectivity, it may be maybe a much more precarious area in the form where it feels like it could fall over or tip over, like any of these could at any moment. And actually, it's kind of interesting. I think by time maybe this camera or this film rolls or is visible on the website, it's very likely that this piece will be in a different configuration. So I'm working a lot in a collage-based manner right now, which I started doing probably about 10 years ago. I started working a little bit more collage-oriented. As a way of opening up. I didn't really like the way that the pieces came out exactly how I had envisioned them earlier on in my time of working, and I felt like at that point, I was just going through the motions of making something once I had that, and it the pieces kind of died on the table at that point. So, in this situation here, I'm making all of these pieces in parts, little sections of clay like this, little extruded loops of clay or something that's squeezed and pinched and shaped and then underglazed and left dry. And I take all of those pieces and parts and I'm creating a catalog or a library of forms to work from. And then, once those things are all fired in the kiln, then I bring them to the table, put them on the turnstile, figure out what the base or the general structure of that form is going to be. And then I start to just move things around and start to play with them, just like any kid would do with a pile of blocks. And the nice thing is that I'll go through 10 different iterations of the same general group of objects and keep shaping them around, and then I'll kind of decide basically on a structure that it's going to be when it's finished. But when I take that all apart and I start mixing up epoxy, I have to then somehow remember how some of those parts go back together. So again, there's all these places where I'm stopped from doing this thing that I have kind of predetermined or decided. There's always something new that comes into the fold. As I'm composing these, you find an area like this is very much unresolved for me right now and in process. And then, it starts to, as I come around to this side, I'm starting to like what's going on in this section. But I think actually it's more complicated to me to make one of these pedestal pieces because they have to do different things as you move around it. It's more than just a one-trick pony, I guess, hopefully. Whereas the two-dimensional pieces, the ones that are hanging on the wall, those ones you can kind of see everything you're going to see. So the most that happens in that moment is you're back from it. You can view and have one experience from a distance. But my hope is that the material and the color and the composition pull you forward a little bit closer. And as you get closer, you start to discover more things in the work, whether those are exactly what they are, whether they are things just simply about the material or something technical like that. But hopefully you get up there and you discover something that causes you to change the way that you're thinking about the work. So the title of the show that Megan and I came up with, well, I'll give her most of the credit for it, is Traverse. And one of the reasons that it resonated with me is that I think one of the inspirations for the work that I make is when I go out into landscape, whether it's in Montana or Colorado or any place in between. One of the things that I like to do is I like to move around, to travel as much around in that space as I can. I'll go off trail, I'll slide down a scree slope, I'll jump in the water. It's about making sure you're absorbing every little bit of that space and not just necessarily staying on the path. And I think about that kind of thing happening in the work as well, where you really don't really settle into one particular place to view the work. Whether you can walk around or zoom in and zoom out. They're all kind of ways of I think, of traversing the work.